Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of 9/11 Freefall. I am the host, Andy Steele, and we have been covering through our bulletins at AE 9/11 Truth this docu-series put out by Tucker Carlson. It's called the 9/11 Files, and with each bulletin we sent out to our supporters, we patiently waited. Episode 1, Episode 2, Episode 3. Then came Episode 4, which is the graphic I've stolen from behind me here. That's Tucker Carlson's graphic. Makes it pretty convenient to use it myself here for the background scenery. But Episode 4 is the one where they talk about building number 7, the central focus of AE 9/11 Truth, of course, along with the Twin Towers as well. But the thing that wakes everybody up to the fact that we were all lied to about why these 3 buildings came down on that terrible day 24 years ago, the smoking gun of 9/11. And in this Episode 4, they mention AE 9/11 Truth and the UAF study. So we're going to be joined, of course, by our co-host, Mr. Craig McKee, who just wrote a wonderful article critiquing the Tucker Carlson series. I know that Episode 5 has already been released, right, Craig, on his subscription service, but hasn't been put out for free. We're waiting until they're put out for free. We don't want to step on any toes there.
It's actually out today. It's out today, Andy. Episode 5 is out now. Yeah.
All right.
So
we'll get that out later.
They're all available.
Yeah. So if you can't wait for us to send it to you, you don't have to wait for our permission to watch it, folks. Go to Tucker Carlson's YouTube. You can watch Episode 5. But we're going to do our own critique of the episode of number 4, where they're talking about our evidence. And if you're hearing some noise, the neighbors, I think, are having an argument upstairs. So, anyway, I'm not doing this from a fancy studio, folks. This is a room in my apartment that I have
clearly not.
No, exactly. So sometimes there's some domestic squabbling going on upstairs, and can't really do anything about it. But anyway, we move on and we focus on what we got to do, which is Episode 4, Building 7. And I'm going to be playing some clips today. I tried to carefully edit them so they're not edited in a way to change the context. But I don't want to just sit and play the whole segment and steal from there, as we're going to be critiquing them and such. And there's some pros and cons that you covered in your article, Craig. So let's just start off talking about that article before we play any clips from that show.
Sure. I mean, it's the second post on the AE 9/11 Truth blog that we launched a couple of weeks back. It's the piece I wrote is kind of more of an overview. It doesn't really plunge too deeply into the details of each of the 5 episodes. I hope to, I plan to follow up this post with another post that does that gets into more of the detail, because there's a whole lot to unpack in this series. And we're going to talk about Episode 4, and I guess maybe we'll go beyond Episode 4 too, I hope. But what is said in the rest of the series may not seem like it directly relates to our mission necessarily, but it does reinforce some concerning elements of the official story, frankly. And I think that is something that we have to grapple with, especially we in the 9/11 Truth Movement. We have to grapple with that because it's a mixed bag, is what I would say at best. And there are obviously going to be people that are going to say, like, oh, it's complete, limited hangout, it's whatever. Then there are others that are going to say, well, we're just so thrilled that a major force in the media like Tucker Carlson is willing to look at our evidence and to ask real questions and to call for a new investigation. So all this is positive, but it's kind of against the backdrop of a position that basically that al-Qaeda and Muslim terrorists carried out 9/11, and that the U.S. government had a variety of motivations for failing to stop this. That's kind of the thrust of the whole series. And so I guess we'll sort of talk about the specifics of some of the clips you've chosen. But my question, and we can continue to talk about this, is does he connect the whole story to that fourth episode and the Building 7? Like, he kind of hints at, well, who are some of the tenants in Building 7? The CIA, the Secret Service, Department of Defense. But it still isn't very clear. Like, I would wonder what a new person watching the series would come out thinking, because they're certainly would be asking questions about Building 7, but they would be doing it in the context of, al-Qaeda attacking the U.S. So I guess that's the thrust of my article, is to ask the question, is this a positive? Is the series helpful to us? Or does it bury some of the most important evidence even more deeply than it has been buried in the past? And I know there are going to be different opinions about that even in our own movement. And I'm sure some of those will come up in our conversation too. But I think these are questions we have to ask, and I don't think we necessarily have to be so grateful to Tucker Carlson that we can't criticize what's in his series. If we start doing that, then we're basically giving over control of our movement to people who are willing to entertain questions about the whole event, but maybe are not prepared to go as far as we would want them to go. So that's going to be a thing the movement's going to be wrestling with in the weeks and months ahead.
Right. Now, the clips tonight are only of the Building 7 segment from episode 4, because that's the focus at 8/11 Truth. But we're going to be talking about the rest of it as well. Let me just say this from the offset. I am not one of these people who is like, oh, screw Tucker Carlson. He said mean stuff about 9/11 Truth in the past, and he's just irredeemable now. I am not one of those people. I don't even like. I like Tucker Carlson. He seems like an okay guy on the screen and such, and I think he's done some good work on certain stories and all of this. And I'm very appreciative that he took the time to put together this 5-part docuseries. But if we restrict ourselves to just being so happy that Building 7 was even mentioned at all in something that is, I don't know if you'd classify him as mainstream, but he's definitely mainstream podcasting. There's a new mainstream being formed here.
Yeah.
We're not going to be doing our job. Let me just tell the audience a quick story. There was a time period where I was really involved in the Ron Paul campaign for liberty and the Fed movement. And it was at the same time I was like involved with 9/11 Truth. And I could have gone 2 different ways at that point. It was whatever I sunk all of my energy into. It's like in a parallel universe, I'm out there talking about libertarian issues and ending the Fed still in 2025. But in this universe, I am with 9/11 Truth. And I went to a campaign for liberty, sort of like a teach-in they had sponsored regarding, how to be an activist, how to lobby members of Congress or in any office. And one of the things that they said was that, you're going to develop a relationship with some politician and they're going to offer you some kind of breadcrumb. And the guy said, 80% of you are going to be so happy to get that you're just going to settle for that right there. You're going to go no further. That's as far as you're going to go. Right. But you got to keep pushing until it's exactly what you want. You got to keep on trying to get what you are seeking, not just the breadcrumb, but the full sandwich. Those are my words, not necessarily theirs, but that was the essence of the message.
Yeah.
So very respectfully, yes, I appreciate Tucker Carlson. And had this come out back in 2009, this would have been breathtaking to watch.
Yeah.
Sort of like when Jesse Ventura covered 9/11 on his show. Now, some of that show was a little hokey with him standing in a leather jacket, and they have the meetings with the other people on his team, and they're pretending to discuss this stuff. I know that's done for showmanship or whatever,
Yeah.
but it was very exciting that this was on mainstream television cable network at the time. Had Tucker Carlson, somebody of his elevated status, actually put this out back in 2009, this would have been a great start. But here we are 24 years later. None of the people in this movement are getting any younger. Some of the people, this includes also people who may have been involved in the attacks as well. They're not getting any younger, and they're probably heading towards not being in this world anymore. And we want to still see justice served for them. And so much work has been done by AE, 9/11 Truth, and others in exposing this terrible crime. The material is out there. The people are out there to interview. And you notice that nobody in the 9/11 Truth movement was interviewed as part of this this segment on Building 7. And there are plenty of people. I mean, usually we've done a couple of episodes with just you and me for the last few weeks, but for 13 years, I've been running a show mainly focused on the World Trade Center evidence. And I've been able to find all sorts of people. We've had them on the Focus. We've had them in webinars and such. We can get you people to talk about this for at least 5 minutes, and it'll be a really power-packed 5 minutes. But nobody was interviewed for that. And we'd like to see more. I don't want just the breadcrumbs. And so, yeah, some people are saying, Tucker is just easing people into that. Well, I don't think you should be easing people into an issue as a reporter. I think you should just tell the truth, whatever that may be. But that might be the opinion of those people in the 9/11 Truth movement. I don't believe the 9/11 Truth movement needs to be of one voice on everything. I like there being different voices, different opinions. That's what a movement is about, not being, single-minded on every step, everything we do, lockstep on everything. That's called a cult. And that is not something that we are. So, kudos to those people for having their opinion, but we're going to do our job here and focus on what we disagree with in the docu-series, just like we should be focused on what we disagree with in the official story as a movement. So those are my comments on that. And I don't know, Craig, do you have anything to add before we start playing clips?
Well, I mean, I think there are. I'd be interested to know what you've chosen, because there are a lot of good things that come out of that fourth episode, and I know that people are going to get excited about that, and I think that's reasonable to do that, because this is an area of 9/11 that really hasn't made much of an appearance in the mainstream, and so it is exciting that we're talking about Building 7, and we're talking about why this Steele was taken away and all that sort of thing. But the whole series it's 5 episodes, and it's over 2 hours long. And I think there are issues with when you take the whole thing as a single kind of piece of research. It raises a lot more concerns than it does solve problems. It reinforces a lot of things that probably people who haven't followed 9/11, don't know much about it. They assume certain things to be true because they've seen it in the media, and this series kind of reinforces a lot of those ideas. So, I think it's not. There's no problem. There shouldn't be any problem in looking at the details and critiquing it. Tucker Carl, I mean, like you said, you talk about crumbs. I mean, it is. I mean, there is. It's a double-edged sword, because when you constantly use words like hijackers and the 9/11 attacks and the terrorist attacks, you're kind of as my good friend Barry Zwicker, the 9/11 researcher, has said many times, those kinds of things are like they're kind of, I don't know how he puts it very well, but basically it's kind of like a thing that gets into your brain. It's like with the DNA of the official story. So it kind of promotes in how we think. It promotes these elements of the official story without us necessarily being conscious of it. So, So yeah, so I guess that would be my comments up to now.
Well, one of your criticisms was that it's sort of promoting this idea, which we got delivered to us at the conclusion of the 9/11 Commission, is that this was a failure of imagination, that they were trying to recruit these hijackers as assets, and it just went awry, that this was bumbling from the CIA and the FBI, that Israel may have had foreknowledge of it, and that's as far as it goes with them. That's something that I think would have been more plausible had it not been for the controlled demolitions of the towers, right? It'd be more believable had Building 7 not come down in 6.5 seconds on September 11th at 5:20 in the afternoon. Had the Twin Towers not come down in the way that they did, where the top parts are crushing all the way to the bottom and then destroying themselves in the final crush up phase, as Bazant likes to say. Controlled demolition changes the entire formula with which we look at September 11th. And you cannot just say incompetence and have controlled demolition be acknowledged, be known. There's something more going on there that's beyond just, oh, we screwed up so horribly. One of the most best funded intelligence apparatuses in the entire world, the United States, and they just completely dropped the ball on this. And somehow, maybe terrorists got explosives into the towers and were able to manage that. Well, that's not saying a lot for World Trade Center security, is it? Or for any of these intelligence agencies. I don't buy it, of course. And so controlled demolition changes everything. And so it's great that we're covering Building 7. He doesn't talk about the Twin Towers at all in this segment.
No, that's a big gaping hole in the whole episode.
Yeah.
He kind of focuses on the fact that Building 7 gets virtually no mention in the 9/11 Commission report. And so that's that's kind of makes us think there's something fishy about that. But then he sort of dismisses the towers by saying, but of course it got mentioned a lot. Well, that doesn't mean that it got, what was mentioned about it was true. And so I think that's a failing of his look at the World Trade Center, is so that he only focuses on Building 7, which is important, but it's not the only building that was brought down in a controlled demolition that day. It was, one of three.
And if he's watching this right now, there's plenty more to dig deep on in the Twin Towers. I have my article, my Silver Bullets article, and the reason I wrote it was because these are things that negate the NIST reports, make them completely false, renders them completely useless, and forces NIST to go back to the drawing board. And so, if you have an incomplete analysis at NIST, or an incorrect one, that justifies the need for a new investigation there. But there is plenty of evidence on the Twin Towers. I understand there's a lot for him to pack in, but I really think the controlled demolition issue, because it is such a game changer when you're looking at what went wrong with September 11th for the average person, I think this deserves a series in itself. And of course, there's plenty of people out there, we've had them on our show many times, that would be available and happy to talk about this on camera. All right, let's go ahead and play the first clip. Again, folks, I just took out little snippets. I don't want to just play the whole segment for you. I don't want to upset the Tucker Carlson people by doing that. So we're just going to play some segments and talk about them. This is the first one.
If you wanted conspiracy theories to flourish after the 9/11 attacks, here's what you'd do. You'd suppress video evidence of the attacks themselves. You'd ship the rubble from the attacks overseas immediately without looking at it. You'd call everyone who disputed the official narrative crazy or a criminal. You'd engage in a campaign of very obvious lies about the attacks. You'd do everything you could to prevent an actual investigation into what happened. You'd avoid any public trials. And when you captured and killed the perpetrator, you'd show no photos or video evidence of the raid that killed him, and then you'd dump his body into the middle of the ocean. Then you'd use the attack to justify the invasion of a completely unrelated country on behalf of a foreign power. In other words, you do exactly what the U.S. government did in the wake of 9/11. It's possible that there are people who wanted conspiracy theories to thrive. The more far out, the better. The more time people spend wondering about directed energy weapons, the less time they focus on the obvious, the facts hiding in plain sight. And the main fact that they are ignoring is our government's central role in facilitating those attacks.
Well, that's an interesting statement, facilitating those attacks. Now, you're Mr. Dictionary here. Sometimes I use words incorrectly. I got a little bit of that George W. Bush problem going on. But does that mean they made it happen?
I don't think so. No, I think when he says facilitate, I think he means create the conditions where it could happen. Okay. They made it. Now, there are things even in the series, and I'll come back to the specific clip, but there are things in the series that kind of don't make a lot of sense unless there is a deliberate desire to see this thing happen. When they go into, the fact that they had, many different plans in the works to get bin Laden, and yet the operations always seem to be canceled at the last minute, and mostly by the Clinton administration. So, So anyway, but definitely, the thing he talks about conspiracy theories in there, which is a little concerning because he's saying, if the government wanted conspiracy theories to thrive, it's almost like he's building into that language that, conspiracy theories are bad, and normally you wouldn't want them to thrive, but he's sort of hinting that maybe it's because some of these conspiracy theories are actually true, but it still kind of uses the language of conspiracy theories are bad, which I don't personally appreciate. I think he could have phrased that differently, and I just and when he talks about directed energy weapons, he doesn't say very much about that. I don't know what somebody that doesn't follow 9/11 would think of that reference. Like, well, what would they'd be scratching their heads, I think, about what is he talking about? But he's clearly pointing to that as a far out theory, and implying that it's the kind of thing that would be used to distract the public from, more important truths. But I, it's the language, like the idea of thriving conspiracy theories that bothered me in that clip.
Well, and that is the only reference to the do theory, and I don't believe in that at all, and I'm not going to put out information or a theory based on some hypothetical weapon that has not even been acknowledged to exist yet.
Right.
But there are theories put out there to try to distract people. The idea that no airplanes hit the twin towers, even though we see them on video. There's plenty of eyewitness accounts. I'm sure people are going to be going nuts, the people that believe this, in the comment section. It's kind of interesting. Like 9/11 Truth is like the early Christians back in ancient times. They all had these different sects that believed in different things, and they would fight each other and stuff. But no, I mean, there are things that are put out to just get people off on some ridiculous tangent and are easily discreditable. What about let's play devil's advocate, because a lot of times I will say, like, for instance, when I was getting Richard Gage onto C-SPAN, I made the argument to C-SPAN that, once you do this, nobody can say that you're being unfair to the truthers anymore. I stepped into their world. I spoke their language. And that made the person I was talking to pause. And I think that sealed the deal. Of course, I'll never know that for certain until I'm in the afterlife and can review stuff. But I really feel that sealed the deal when I said that. And I accomplished that by playing both sides, stepping into their world, into their mindset, and getting that so that Richard could be on for those 40 minutes and reach the millions of people that we did. So could you say that maybe his argument here is just saying, look, you don't like conspiracy theories. Well, look at all the stuff you did to foster them, and you never answered these questions.
Well, I would say that what your example, your C-SPAN example, to me, that's a very reasonable thing to say to somebody, to say, like, look, because you're really saying, a lot of people have been unfair to people that are questioning the official story. And if you'd like to avoid being one of those people, you'll give us a fair chance. That seems to me to be a very reasonable thing to say.
And they were being accused of being unfair too. That's what I was taking advantage of in that negotiation.
Okay. Well, okay, even better then. But the idea of but I don't think that's the same situation as what Carlson's doing. He's building into his language the idea that conspiracy theories flourishing is bad, and it buys into the language that that establishment propaganda, official story propaganda uses to dismiss challenges to the official story. It's like it's just a conspiracy theory, and so he's kind of challenging orthodoxy, but at the same time reinforcing it in a backhanded kind of way. So it's like so much of the series, it's a double-edged sword, and I wish he didn't feel the need to pander to the people that think a lot of conspiracy theories are kooky. I mean, obviously, there are lots of kooky opinions out there, but that doesn't mean that questioning an official narrative should be sort of slotted into that category automatically, I don't think.
Well, you got to take yourself seriously. And I learned this early in the 9/11 truth movement. And, in terms of certain things, like you go to an event, dress up, don't just wear, whatever you pulled out of the laundry basket that morning. But also don't apologize for what you're saying. Please don't think I'm a conspiracy theorist, but I think
I hate it when people say that. I hate that. I do.
Yeah. And so just, if you want to be taken seriously, take yourself seriously. And that would be my advice for Tucker on this. It's a serious topic, and I think we've got enough evidence to justify shining a spotlight on it at the very least. And that's also my advice to the people out there. Don't apologize unless you're really wrong. Don't ever on something. But just certainly don't apologize for having an opinion. All right, let's go to number 2.
On the morning of September 11th, Lower Manhattan was cut off from the public with military-style checkpoints. World Trade Center Building 7 collapsed that afternoon at 5:20 p.m. Video that has been widely circulated appears to show it falling symmetrically into its own footprint. Several buildings closer to the Twin Towers, meanwhile, remain standing. That's odd. And then the debris was removed immediately and shipped to Asia. That's even stranger.
All right, so very good. I think these are all facts that we've been talking about for a number of years here in the 9/11 truth movement, and the fact that the debris was moved so quickly, never got a real analysis. Although there was a little bit of an analysis where they found the Swiss cheese, holes in the World Trade Center steel that was documented in Appendix C of the FEMA report, and you can even see a picture of John Gross of NIST, forever in blue jeans and his hard hat there, standing next to it, posing.
Yes, I remember that picture. Yeah,
I remember it very well too. And it was funny because the guy, the truth. I don't know if he wants me to say his name, but the truth activist who discovered this sent me the picture. And I'm not Columbo here. I don't catch on to what he wants me to see in this, and I'm just like, okay, well, and maybe I shouldn't tell that story, but the way that John Gross was posed and everything, I'm like, that's what you want me to see? Okay. And he's like, no, look at the steel there. But anyway, but no, that's very important information that the 9/11 truth movement brings forth. So any comments on that clip?
Well, I mean, no, I mean, it was I don't know if this is something I should have known, but I mean, the thing about there being checkpoints all around Lower Manhattan, I guess I don't think I specifically knew that they had literally set up checkpoints, which implies that nobody could get in. Although I guess that makes perfect sense. Perhaps I should have been aware of that. Yeah, I mean, there's not much to say. I mean, I'm guessing that you're probably going to show something that I'll have more to sort of question on related to Building 7. But no, I think it's good that he mentioned the steel, and he actually quotes from a New York Times article that talks about the thinning of the steel, and even raises the question of why why the steel would have been melted in that way. Given the fact that the temperatures wouldn't have been hot enough, which, I mean, but that's the thing with I mean, Carlson relies mostly on official type sources like mainstream media and CIA agents and FBI agents. And I wish he had a little more non sort of mainstream sources to weigh in, even though, like, that New York Times article, it's pointing something out that's important to point out, but it's just kind of it's too bad that he has to depend on the New York Times to introduce that topic to us. So,
all right. So I I just played number 3 for the audience, so I'm going to play number 2. This actually came before there. It doesn't really matter though, because they're just quick clips.
No one will understand.
I didn't even have to say that. The audience wouldn't even probably notice. All right,
they wouldn't.
Let me go ahead and play number 2 now.
The circumstances around Building 7's collapse and the near total absence of an explanation for why it collapsed provoked, in the end, a Senate investigation.
Start with Building 7. Again, I don't know that you can find structural engineers that would say that thing didn't come down in any other way than a controlled demolition.
All right. So the reason I pulled that out is he said it provoked a Senate investigation. I think that's a mistake there. And I'm not being a nitpicky or whatever, but he's playing a clip of Ron Johnson speaking out, and God bless Ron Johnson for doing so. But that's not a Senate investigation. A Senate investigation would be on C-SPAN. So
it's you can't have a Senate investigation with one senator.
I wish you could. I wish you could.
I wish we'd be on our way if at least he's asking those questions. I think Johnson is still, I think, coming from a similar position in that, he's talking about how the attacks could have been prevented and stuff like that. But at least he's questioning the controlled demolition, and he's the only currently elected official, who's been willing to do that. So I think we have to be appreciative of that.
But no investigation yet.
No.
Yet. Let's play number 4.
Debris.
According to a New York Times article published 5 months after the attacks, quote, an unknown number of steel columns has been sent off to mills as far away as Asia without ever having been examined or saved. This made it nearly impossible for engineers to answer the monumental questions of exactly why and how the buildings, designed to sustain a jet impact, completely collapsed. To the extent that any analysis of the debris was done at all, it was done by volunteers at a scrapyard in Jersey City, New Jersey. According to the New York Times, the deepest mystery uncovered in the investigation involves extremely thin bits of steel collected from the trade towers and from 7 World Trade Center, a 47-story high-rise that also collapsed for unknown reasons. The steel apparently melted away, but no fire in any of the buildings was believed to be hot enough to melt steel outright.
There you go. So I'm playing clips that are good. I mean, if we were grading the paper, right? This is a college student. You would write, "I like this, very good," like in red over it.
Right.
Because I want to highlight the positive too. I mean, some of these facts are things that people have, the majority of the audience hasn't heard before. That Tucker is bringing out there. And so there was no real kind of analysis done on this steel. And certainly the stuff that was figured out by Niels Harrit and his team out there. I mean, NIST never even bothered to test the dust samples for incendiaries or explosives or any of that stuff. But there was no real kind of analysis and even any kind of curiosity. They want to say, oh, these are just a bunch of amateurs who got together on the internet and discovered all of this, but they don't even really address this at all. So this is good that Tucker is bringing this out. That's why we included it. Your thoughts, Craig?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I unfortunately anticipated your clips there by talking about the New York Times article before you played it, but yeah, it's good. I mean, it's most of what he says about Building 7 is good. I guess I just worry a little bit about like whether there's any context given. Like, I mean, he relies. I mean, again, I don't want to anticipate the next clip you're going to show or future ones, but
Right.
I mean, he relies on, like, he quotes a lot from the NIST report, and then he sort of balances that, or sort of balances it by quoting from the University of Alaska Fairbanks study by Leroy Halsey.
Well, I think
And
the
that's
Halsey
good.
thing comes up first, and then the NIST thing after, if I remember. We're going to find out in a second, but
I'm not sure about that, but maybe you're right. I think he starts with NIST, but and then goes back to NIST after. But I could be wrong. I could be wrong about that. Yeah, I mean, it's these elements that are mentioned are all positive, and they hopefully will provoke people to start looking into this themselves. But boy, he could have helped along even more by connecting a few more dots, I think. Like he mentions Barry Jennings, and he shows a clip, and he uses Barry Jennings to back up the idea that there were explosions that went off, that were heard, which is great. He doesn't explain who Barry Jennings is, and he doesn't explain that Barry Jennings went into Building 7, and some of the things he saw in Building 7, which were pretty significant. So it's too bad that he couldn't have added a couple of details about that. Anyway, so yeah, it's
really
as far as it
deserves
goes.
its own docuseries. Controlled Demolition really deserves its own docuseries.
Well, yeah.
I mean, AE has covered it extensively because that's what AE does. But
Right.
if you're going to, for a mainstream audience, there's so much to dive into here, and I've got word files full of just extensive notes on these things, my little cheat sheets for whatever I'm doing a show or whatever that I've taken from talking to various people over the years, from watching the AE films. And I'm going to be citing some of them tonight when we get to a certain point. But yeah, there could have been a lot more elaboration on Barry Jennings. I understand he's working within a time constraint, and that you got to sort of serialize this into little bite-sized pieces for the audience, because the attention spans are worn down to a nub now in our modern day. But that's why I want to see him dive deeper. It's not a criticism. It's just like, it's sort of like my art teacher in high school. I used to be like, how's this? And she'd be like, well, you can be done if you want to. Use some of that like motherly guilt on me. And I'd be like, okay, what's wrong? And she'd be like, well, you could put some shadow here, and, maybe bring out the sunlight on this leaf here and all that. That's what I would do. But, if you want to be done, you can turn it in. Like, okay, fine, I'll go do more. So that's what I'm doing here. Is like, you can be done if you want to, Tucker, but I'm just saying you could dive a little bit deeper into Barry Jennings.
And a lot of other things. I mean, he does hit some highlights for sure, and that's good. But I think if I were unfamiliar with the story of 9/11 and the questions about it, I think I'd be a little bit puzzled about the whole World Trade Center aspect of it, because I would wonder, how does this connect with the other four parts, which seem to focus on government, like, ineptitude and sneaky rivalries between agencies, and the CIA keeping things from the FBI and all this sort of stuff. I would sort of try to figure out, how does that connect to explosives in a building in New York City? I wish he had. My bottom line for him, and I don't know if I should get to the bottom line already, but my bottom line is that he didn't even acknowledge the possibility that the government may have actually carried this out on purpose. He doesn't even, like, that's the one thing he will not say throughout the whole thing. He, as you pointed out about it, like, he's willing to talk about other governments having knowledge of the event before it happened, and having specific things to gain from the event, Israel in particular. But he doesn't mention that the possibility that the U.S. government itself might have done the whole operation, and yet he has enough blame to go around. Like it's not like he puts it past them that they could do something that bad. He just doesn't mention the possibility that they did. So
okay, so let's go to number 6. Where's number 6? That's number 6 right there.
How have other steel frame buildings around the world, similar in design to that in Tower 7, fared during fires? In 1991, for example, the 38-story One Meridian Plaza in Philadelphia had an 8-floor fire that burned for 18 hours, and yet the building didn't collapse. In 1988, the 62-story First Interstate Bank building in Los Angeles had a massive fire that started on the 12th floor. There was no structural failure. In 2017, the 24-story Grenfell Tower in London burned for over 24 hours, and yet the internal steel withstood the fire. So why then did Building 7 collapse after just 7 hours of burning, in a way that no steel frame building anywhere in the world has ever collapsed?
Okay, that's good points to make, and something that certainly we cite as well. However, if you wanted to just dive a little deeper, again, you can be done if you want to, but there's a little bit more. What I find interesting to do is to look into situations where you've had these buildings have a collapse of some kind. There was and I'm trying to remember the name of it. It was like the Department of Architecture building at some university in Europe where they had a partial collapse. And if you watch it, there's pieces of it that fall away, but you don't have this straight down symmetrical collapse like with Building 7. Now, there are trolls in the comments section on other videos saying it wasn't straight down symmetrical. It started to lean to the south at the end. Okay, in the last few seconds, it starts to tilt forward, but for the majority, for the majority of the fall, it is going straight down, right? So whenever you do have some kind of a collapse, I've even watched wood frame buildings. There was a fire at a restaurant in my town, and the fire department hadn't arrived yet. So I actually was driving by and was only like 10 feet from this fire, not anticipating it coming. And I just figured go past it, get as far away from it as possible. And a piece of it came down as I was driving by, just to heighten the terror of the situation. And, but the whole thing didn't just come crumbling down. It ended up as rubble in the end, but it didn't all come crumbling down in one shot, because fire doesn't typically do that, and that was a wood frame building, looked like a barn. They'd converted it to a restaurant. But this is a steel frame high rise, straight down, symmetrical, 6.5 seconds.
Actually, let me ask you,
even when you have collapses.
Well, yeah, right. Do you show a clip about the where he talks about Building 7, the video of it, Building 7? Because I'll comment on it. If not, I'll comment on it.
You bet I do. That might even be I didn't label these based on content. I was being lazy and gave them numbers. So if it's not the next clip, it'll be coming up soon.
It'll be coming up. Okay, good. Because I would have mentioned it. Otherwise, I would have just commented on it. But if it's coming up, we'll wait for that.
Let's just do it now.
Sure.
With the support of a group called Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, Professor Leroy Hulsey of the University of Alaska at Fairbanks conducted an independent study whose findings were released in 2020. Professor Hulsey found that office fires of the kind in Building 7 on 9/11 could not have produced sufficient thermal expansion to cause the crucial girder to fail. It's impossible, he found. And more significantly, he and his team found that NIST's explanation does not account for what anyone can see on video, which is that the entire building came down all at once, not in a progressive collapse, but in a total collapse. Something else, therefore, must have triggered the downfall. There's only one thing that could have triggered a collapse like the one we saw on television, and that is a controlled demolition. That was his conclusion.
Okay. So we're going to get to the clip you were talking about in a second, because I know that's going to come up next. All right, just a quick correction. He says he says that was his conclusion. The only thing that could trigger it was a controlled demolition. For accuracy's sake, Leroy Halsey doesn't go that far in the report. What he talks about is the fact that you can only have the exterior and internal columns removed simultaneously, virtually simultaneously, to get the same kind of collapse that we witnessed on video there, the way that Building 7 actually came down. And then he ends it there. And if you've got at least a couple of brain cells in your head, you come to the conclusion that the only way that could have happened is through controlled demolition. But he didn't conclude controlled demolition in the report. So just a quick correction there for Tucker.
Yeah.
But hey,
so he aired on our side for that, right? He actually gave us a little extra there.
There you go. We'll take it. We'll take it. But yeah, he mentioned architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth.
Yeah, that's a
study. But he also mentioned that it was an independent study, because the debunkers out there will say, well, yeah, you paid for it. Of course, it's going to come to the conclusion you wanted to come to. But
that was very good. That was very fair, the way he did that. That was the way he presented that. He didn't try to sort of slant, he didn't try to hurt the credibility of the study, which, of course, was independent. I mean, as people may remember, Halsey didn't even want to do the study at first. He had to be talked into it. So, yeah. So that was good. The fact that he talked about that was good. Yeah.
All right, here we go. Let's get to the clip you were referencing.
One issue with the controlled demolition hypothesis is that the widely circulated video of the building coming down is selectively edited. In fact, the building did not exactly collapse all at once. It came down in 2 stages. What you're seeing now is the full video of the collapse. It shows the penthouse collapsing first, and then very quickly, the rest of the building going. The unedited video leaves more questions than it answers. It calls into question the official NIST narrative, but it doesn't conclusively show a controlled demolition either.
Okay, this is the record scratch moment right here. I remember we did a focus when Roland was still with us, debunking that Sabin civil engineering video that claims to debunk us. And he said that the videos are selectively edited. Now, when he was saying they were selectively edited, he was saying that they were sped up. And that's not the case at all. He might have found one that was sped up, and just ignores all the other ones that are at normal speed. But in this, he's saying that they're selectively edited. I mean, nothing is really selectively edited. Now, there is a clip that is commonly used that it shows it at a certain angle where you see it coming straight down. But I know 9/11 Truth, we've shown every single angle that we know is available of Building 7. And we have never, ever ignored the fact that the penthouse comes down first. I know that in early videos, I mean, when Richard Gage talks about this, or even, David Chandler or whoever, they always talk about the penthouse drops first and then the rest of the building, which to me, I mean, is even more suspiciously, it looks more suspicious as you watch it come down, because it shows some kind of order taking place here, the internal columns being taken out and then the whole rest of it. So I want to contest that notion that anything has been selectively edited. We're working with the videos that are available. We have debunkers in the comments saying, show it from the south side. Well, I would show me a video from the south side. I would love to see a video from the south side and analyze that and go over that. But we're working with what we got. If somebody comes forward with some amateur video or whatever, we'll be happy to look at that. But no, we have never selectively edited anything in that penthouse. I mean, that penthouse is included in animations that we've put together. It's included in the Halsey study in an animation, because I have those animations on my hard drive where the penthouse very clearly drops first. I use that animation as the base object or whatever for our animated opening to the event this year, and you can see very clearly the penthouse drops first and then the rest of the building. So this has not been ignored at all. Comment?
No, yeah, that's a real weak point, which is why I wanted to comment on it before. It's a real weak point in his summary of the Building 7 evidence. I mean, the phrase selectively edited implies somebody's trying to pull a fast one, right? If you selectively edit something, it implies that you're trying to mislead people. And I'm not aware that people in the truth movement have edited it at all. I mean, as you point out, we've shown all kinds of different angles. Who is he saying edited the footage? And kind of worse than that, he implies that there's sort of an attempt to mislead. But then when he says, when you see the unedited video, it creates more questions than it answers, implying that things are less clear when you see the penthouse drop than they were before. And I don't think that's true. And I'm sure some of our engineers would have, would be able to bring some expertise to that. But Tucker Carlson kind of leaves it like in doubt, as like, well, when you see the unedited video, it just leaves you with more questions. Well, not really. It may leave you with the question of what made the penthouse drop before the rest of the building, but it doesn't leave you with doubt about controlled demolition in any way. So that was a problematic section because when he talks about, he compares, and this part's good, he compares the idea of global collapse to progressive collapse. And the fact that the penthouse drops first doesn't mean it's a progressive collapse. And some people, I think, would watch that and they would wonder, well, so does that mean maybe it was a progressive collapse after all, instead of a global one? Like it's just left a little bit murky. So I think that was maybe a weak point in his roundup of the Building 7 facts.
Yeah, I don't like the fact that he's implying that anything has been selectively edited. I mean, that would be sacrilege in the 9/11 truth movement. You'd be run out if you were proven to be lying about evidence in any way. So all of the videos that I have, I mean, sometimes if we're doing something like that's creative, like a reel or whatever, I'll start it in mid collapse or whatever. But that, that's just, but it's still the same collapse sequence that you're seeing.
Wow. Yeah.
Nothing.
I mean, in a controlled demolition, you've got a sequence of destruction. It's not all just like whoosh. It's like it's all timed to sort of to take out the supports in different parts of the building first, and then it's all, it's a sequence.
Yeah, so I'd like him to explain where that's coming from, or who's telling him that. Because there's a ton of people out there, debunkers and such, that are running their mouths and just, they say things, they throw it up against the wall and hope that it sticks in enough people's minds to have done their job or whatever. Doesn't really make a lot of sense when you hear it. So somebody may have said this or gotten to them. This is part of the problem. When somebody prominent appears into the 9/11 truth movement, you have people in the truth movement with their pet theories about dew or holograms at the towers that want to get access to this person and give them an earful about, this disinformation that they're putting out there. Yeah, I'm saying it, disinformation. You got the debunkers that want to sit there and counter them. And it's like a bunch of kennel dogs coming at them at once. So that's why it's, if you get your mitts on somebody that's prominent, that's interested in this, you might want to just keep it under your hat. This is advice for the audience up until, until the right moment, because the second they announce that they're going to get involved in 9/11 truth, man, the tidal wave is going to come right at them. And they're going to get a lot of people giving them wrong information, like, it's been selectively edited. That's why it looks like a controlled demolition. All right, let's get to the last clip here.
Because of how quickly authorities shipped the rubble overseas, we did not get a thorough investigation into the destruction. But one group of scientists did collect and test 4 samples of dust and debris collected by a Manhattan resident about 10 minutes after the collapse of the Second World Trade Center tower, 2 the next day, and a 4th about a week later. In 2009, they published the results of their study in the Open Chemical Physics Journal. In those samples, the scientists found distinctive red-gray chips full of highly energetic and thermitic material. In other words, they found traces of explosive compounds. To its credit, NIST's report did investigate multiple hypothetical blast scenarios, but found it would be impossible to carry out on any floor in the building without detection. It would have required removing or cutting columns with welding torches and placing wires for demolition. NIST found that window breakage patterns on visible floors was not at all like expected from a blast. NIST did not test residue from the attacks for thermite, but did note that thermite burns slowly relative to explosive materials and would require several minutes in contact with a massive steel section to heat it to a temperature that would result in substantial weakening. Additionally, they estimated that at least 0.13 pounds of thermite would be required to heat each pound of steel section to approximately 700 degrees Celsius, the temperature at which steel weakens substantially. Which means that if Building 7 were demolished using thermite, many thousands of pounds of thermite would need to have been placed inconspicuously ahead of time, remotely ignited and somehow held in direct contact with the surface of hundreds of massive structural components to weaken the building, making it an unlikely substance for achieving a controlled demolition. NIST also says that an explosion big enough to take down the building would have been considerably louder than any noises recorded around the time the building collapsed. Yet, eyewitness accounts say they did hear explosions inside the building.
All this time, I'm hearing all type of explosions. All this time, I'm hearing explosions.
Okay, so this is like a combination of different straw man arguments. In one sense, they're talking about, if you use conventional explosives like RDX, you would have these really loud sounds and everyone would hear it. Well, people are hearing explosions, and we actually have firefighters around a phone booth on video talking about, you can hear the explosion right in the video, but they're talking about it. But this is also for, the conventional explosives, the RDX, whereas thermite it would still produce a bit of a sound, but it would be much quieter there. So it's completely ignoring it, just building up the straw man as if we're saying, they use, RDX to bring down the buildings. Well, just ignoring the fact that we're not talking about that. We're talking about something, again, that would be much quieter and which you would use. Common sense would tell you if you're trying to get away with something sneaky, right? You're going to try not to be detected. It also ignores the fact, I remember years ago, and I wasn't even at AE 9/11 Truth yet. But they brought a bunch of prominent people in the 9/11 Truth movement. Richard Gage was included, Luke Radowski, David Ray Griffin. That's all I remember, but there were others too. And they did this demonstration where some alpha dog construction worker puts a hefty bag of thermite onto a beam and lights it up, and it makes a big show, but it doesn't have any effect on the beam. And the experiment was just complete trash because nobody's implying that they just put hefty bags full of thermite up against a beam. This would have to be channeled in some kind of way. Now, there were some form of structural steel cutter charges that were patented after September 11th, like not too long after, like 2005 or whatever. So it would have to be harnessed. And also, we're not talking about your typical run-of-the-mill thermite, as the paper and Niels Harrod has talked about. We're talking about something that has been souped up, super thermite, or I forgot the term that he used here. They're going to use the best of the best. So what this is ignoring is the idea, or is the fact that the thermite was found in the dust. It's sort of like, let's say you had somebody died, and the police come, and they need to make a determination as to why this healthy young person died. And for whatever reason, there's radiation, high levels of radiation in this person's body, but there's no element in the house or in the environment that is radioactive. They can't detect it. They don't know. So they just say, well, it couldn't have been radiation because there's nothing radioactive around here. Well, you're just completely ignoring the fact that there's radiation in this person's body. That's like, the Geiger counter is going off the charts here when you wave it around them. You can't just dismiss evidence because you can't explain it. Right. So,
right. Yeah.
So basically, you have to look at what you have here. And so, just because you're not sure how they got it in there or how they executed it, you can't just dismiss the nanothermite paper. Go ahead.
No, and not only that, but he kind of implies that it's either people in the truth movement, although he doesn't mention the truth movement by name, but that they're asserting that it was thermite, and it's either thermite or it's nothing. Well, nobody has said that it was only thermite. Which I think you were kind of suggesting that there could have been other and undoubtedly were other explosive mechanisms used. In fact, I remember doing an interview with Niels Harrit years ago where he made that comment. He said, nanothermite was definitely used, but it was actually a small part of the whole picture. So, the presence of residue or the traces of nanothermite in the dust indicates that was used, which proves that some kind of demolition took place. But it doesn't mean that that's the only way that the building was brought down. There were, there were undoubtedly a combination of things.
There's glaring facts here, though, like these iron microspheres. They were so prevalent in the World Trade Center dust that official studies used their presence as a way to separate World Trade Center dust from background dust, meaning dust that had nothing to do with the World Trade Center disaster. What is causing these? We've acknowledged earlier in this segment that the jet fuel fires cannot get hot enough to melt the steel. I think Tucker said that in the beginning. If he didn't, that needs to be acknowledged, right? So what is causing these iron microspheres to form? The most logical explanation is that if you have a sudden blast going on, it's going to cause the liquefied metal to form droplets, like rain coming down from the sky, coming down really fast, and the surface tension causes it to form droplets. Now, it's not coming straight down in this case. It'd be blasting outward, right? But what kind of heat and blast is causing these microspheres to be so prevalent that official studies, we're not talking about conspiracy theorist studies, 9/11 truther studies, official studies are using them to say, yep, that's definitely World Trade Center dust. That's how we distinguish it from something that's not the World Trade Center. So you can't just ignore that because this, say, oh, you can't put hefty bags against a beam and bring the building down.
I'm sure Tucker didn't know that.
I'm sure he didn't. And that's the thing. I'm not beating on Tucker here. I mean, Tucker, to me, seems like a good guy. I'm sure there are liberals that are going to be upset at me saying that. He seems, like a fine fellow or whatever. I just think he needs to dive deeper with all of this. And again, as you were saying, the incompetence theory goes out the window when you factor in controlled demolition. You have to do better than that, because I don't think they would be so incompetent to let al-Qaeda get in there with thermitic or incendiaries and all of that. So your comments.
Well, yeah, I did. There are a couple of things in the language of that section that I wanted to comment on. He says NIST found, and I forget what the rest of the sentence is. NIST found that. Well, that's a word you choose when you're basically saying that they found out something that's true. And he also says they noted that thermite burns very slowly. It's not that they asserted that. It's not that they contend that. It's that they noted it. So it's like Tucker, in his choice of language, is kind of putting the seal of approval on these, what I would call assertions by NIST, not facts that they're, NIST asserted something, they didn't find something. And he also, in very sort of careless fashion, I think, he kind of leaves the viewer with the impression that the thermite idea it doesn't really fly because it's, he says it's an unlikely substance, to have created this controlled demolition. So again, if you're not familiar with the evidence, I mean, we can watch that and we see it in one way, but a new person hearing that is going to think, oh, I guess maybe it wasn't a controlled demolition if it's unlikely, so it's like he's just undercut key evidence without really explaining why it should be undercut.
Well, there were elements added. There were elements included in this to make it flash quicker right? Again, this was not just an ordinary thermite you can buy on the internet that they
Right.
used for this operation. This was really souped up super thermite that was used. Maybe we should get Niels Harrod on here to just go over the segment at some point.
That would be great. Yeah.
But also it ignores the fact that Jonathan Cole did a video, his backyard experiment. Now he was just using stuff he could get on the internet or at the hardware store, and he was able to make what he called a thermitic box cutter that could achieve like an angled cut on a steel member in that. And this is just a guy in his backyard playing around, and he was able to do this with regular everyday thermite. And he was able to build this contraption and do this. So you'd have to look at how this thermite is being utilized. There are patented cutter charges patented after September 11th, but who knows what was available beforehand. You can't just, again, assume based off of NIST's explanation. Again, they're talking about NIST in this segment as if they're the final authority. Well, NIST, but NIST concluded that, well, we're challenging NIST's authority. We think NIST is involved in a cover-up here. So that's not going to fly with me that NIST just says this. You have to look at, other ways that it could have been utilized to accomplish the aims of whoever wanted to bring these buildings down. It's not just putting hefty bags up against steel members and running, So I'm a little disappointed. Well, I don't want to say a little. I'm a lot disappointed in that entire segment. We're going to dive deeper into that. I think we need an article or something just addressing that clip number 9 there. So we'll talk about that.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. On the overall series, because we are past the regular hour now that it's a big deal, but on the overall series, talking about some of the other elements, because we only got half of an episode, in this. He goes on to talk about the dancing Israelis and Israel's foreknowledge of a potential of the attacks coming. Talk about that and just the overall series. Give us a good wrap up here, Craig.
Yeah, okay. I mean, there's an enormous amount of detail here, but it is really focused on failures. I mean, he kind of ridicules when he mentions Philip Zelikow using the phrase failure of imagination, and he kind of takes a shot at that. And yet that's kind of what his whole series is really saying. It's really saying that the U.S. government, that everybody had their own interests. The CIA wanted to keep the FBI from knowing about these alleged terrorists who ended up being 2 of the alleged hijackers, coming to the United States. Mark Rossini is interviewed in the first episode, former FBI agent who was working sort of liaison with the Bin Laden unit at the CIA. He wanted to bring stuff to the attention of the FBI, and the CIA basically told him not to. So he, in fact, if I could just grab real quick, there's a quote that he gives that sums up sort of where he's coming from. He's talking about the plan, or the CIA's plan to recruit terrorists from inside al-Qaeda. That's what he calls that the plot that went wrong. And he says in very dramatic fashion in episode 1, that was the grand lie, the grand risk, the grand delusion. So Mark Rossini is telling us that the CIA's desire to get sources inside al-Qaeda was delusional. Not that the whole, he doesn't suggest that this was a complete fabrication, that this was not the real objective. He just sort of said, so it's the incompetence theory. It's the agencies didn't work together properly, and they kept things from each other. And I mean, he certainly is very hard on the Bush administration with good reason. And I did learn a little bit more about the Clinton administration and how often that they how much of a role they played in making sure that bin Laden was left alone. That was interesting. But it's still, it all comes down to the idea that the U.S. government, these different agencies, failed to protect the U.S. from an outside threat. And I don't think very many people in the 9/11 Truth Movement believe that this was an outside threat. That, in fact, is the cover story. So, and I know there are people in the Truth Movement that I heard from a couple of them the other day when we posted this article, who think we should be nicer to Tucker because he might work with us in the future, and so we should really just kind of not criticize him. And I just don't agree with that. And I think on one hand, I think giving him fair criticism does not mean that he's automatically going to refuse to speak to us. It may actually have the opposite effect. It may actually open his eyes to things that he is not considering yet. And I think when you come right down to it, we're a truth movement, and you don't hold back on truth just to try to curry favor with popular media figures in the hope that they will someday, help us out. I think he's helped us out in the sense that he's calling for a new investigation, and that's great. But I fear he has reinforced some unhelpful ideas in the minds of people who watch the series. So it's a mixed bag, I'd say.
I think we're being nice to him, and I do appreciate him talking about this. But I mean, you can be nice to people and still say that they could do better. I mean, believe me, when the Truth Movement doesn't like something I do, I hear about it. So that's what we're gonna do with So that's what we're gonna do with Tucker Carlson, and like that guy back in 2009 when I was in the Ron Paul movement said, don't just settle for breadcrumbs. 80% of you will. You'll be so pleased that Building 7 got talked about for what was like 15, 20 minutes or something, that you'll settle there. No, we're not going to settle till we get to the end. We get a full acknowledgement of what really happened.
Bottom line for me, Andy, is it's the Truth Movement that needs to lead this fight. We cannot fall in behind popular figures, politicians, media people, and let them lead it. As much as we're desperate for them to help us get attention, it's the Truth Movement that has to lead the way.
I'm going to leave it there. Folks, thank you for watching tonight. We'll see you next time we do a show. Bye.
Hit that notification bell and slam the like button and subscribe. Thanks.